Okay, I'm going to go over some assignments that we would have done during this week and how it relates to the notes, and then explain how to do the interactive notebook assignment to get you started on that. Okay, so this week was on how species evolve, and that has to do with isolation, which if you watch the video, that's actually a really good example of how environmental barriers can lead to evolution. The next part, though, which is the biggest part of this week, is going to be classification of living things. And these are some of the things that we would have done in the interactive notebook. For this assignment, these are the levels of classification that we currently use. It's called Linnaean classification. And the broadest level of classification would be the domain. And then it gets more and more and more specific as it gets down to the bottom until you get to the species, which is the actual organism you're studying. So what we would have done on this one is we would be classifying a house cat. And you'd be looking at a house cat and trying to determine what physical traits put it into each one of these categories. Okay, and that's the most important part of this section, is we classify living things according to physical traits. So the domain, it's going to be really general. The domain that a house cat belongs to is eukarya, and you would have, underneath that flap, put the definition of what eukarya is, which is any organism that has a nucleus in their cells. And here's some examples that you would have put inside your interactive notebook. So house cats, in terms of the domain, are put in the same group as plants and amoebas. So it's really general. It only has to do with organisms that have a nucleus. And then it's going to get more and more specific as it goes down. So kingdom, Animalia, is any organism that is made of more than one cell and eats other things for energy. So at that point, plants are out, right? Because plants get their food through photosynthesis. So here's some multicellular organisms that are in the animal kingdom. Okay, so insects, worms, rabbits. The phylum, cats have a spinal cord, so that puts them into chordata. And at that point, the insect and the worm end up in their own group. And this group includes things like dolphins, birds, and reptiles. So as you get more and more specific toward the house cat, according to their physical traits, you would figure all that out. And that's our intro to things being classified according to physical traits. Okay, so we're focusing on physical traits to classify living things. I don't know if you've figure that out or not, but it's physical traits. Okay, the next thing we would have done is you would have gotten a sheet of animals, and you would have been able to color them however you want, right? And then what you would have to do is make a table, which is going to be a branching tree, which is also in the notes, a branching tree classifying these living things. Okay, so you would have colored them however you want, and you would use physical traits to make a tree. Now all these trees would end up being different depending on how you wanted to classify your organisms and how you would color them. Okay, so this is mine as my example. So animals, that would be the top of everyone's, would be animals. And then if you look, there's two lines coming off of each thing, and that's really important for this assignment. It has to be in groups of two. So what I did with my organisms here is I cut them out and I would actually separate them into two groups as I go. So I'd have a pile of organisms with a skeleton and groups without a skeleton. Those that are in the skeleton group, I would have an endo and exoskeleton, and I would work myself down until there was only one organism left. And these two lines coming off of it are really important for the next thing that we would have talked about, which are in the notes as well, which is dichotomous keys. The dichotomous keys are what we use to classify living things. Okay, now this assignment is just sort of a goofy intro assignment, but if you look, there's 2 choices for each one. Okay, just like over here we had 2 choices, right, and 2 choices. Off of each one is 2 choices. Okay, so I'm going to classify, okay, just some random objects, and this would have been our intro lab. It's just kind of goofy, but what you would have to do with this, it's called the Gizmo Lab, and what you would have to do is use what's called a dichotomous key. This is a dichotomous key, which is in your notes, and I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit. Okay, so what you would have done is use this key to classify a pencil. Let me move some of this stuff out of the way. There we go. Okay, you would have used your dichotomous key, this one, to classify the pencil. So you have 2 choices. Object is partly or completely made of metal, or object has no metal. So you look at the pencil, you look at the physical traits of the pencil. Is it partly or completely made of metal, or does it have no metal? Well, this right here is metal. So we would say that the object is partly or completely made of metal. So I would go to step 2. So there's 2 choices at step 2. Object has non-metal parts. Object is completely made of metal. Well, it has non-metal parts. It has an eraser and it has the wood part. Okay, so it has non-metal parts. Go to 3. Object is less than 10 centimeters in length, or object is greater than. And you would have had a ruler and you would have measured that to be more than 10 centimeters. So I'd go to number 4. Object is pointed at one end, or object is not pointed at either end. So I look and, oh, look, it's pointed. So it is a tapered doodad. So you would have put tapered doodad as your answer. Okay, and then there would have been about, I don't know, 15 or so things that you would have used in this lab, right? So let's say we're doing a washer. Okay, so object is partly or completely. You always start here. You always start at the beginning. Okay, so object has no metal, or object is completely or partly. Well, the washer is made of metal. So number 2, object is non-metal parts, completely made. It's completely made. So number 5. Object is greater to, object is less than, so this washer is obviously less than 10 centimeters. So I go to number 9. Object has spiral grooves. No, so I go to 11. And oh, another thing is it's focusing on one trait, and you either have the trait or you don't, which is really important. So it has no spiral grooves, so I go to 11. Outside edge is a circle or not a circle. That's a circle, so go to 12. Object is silver colored. Okay, so my washer is called a quinto. So I would put quinto. Oh, and by the way, you're not copying this down. This is just an example of what you would have done. Okay, so, sorry, I should have told you that before. So this is just an example of what we would have done in class. Okay, so here's my poker chip. And it ends up going faster, right? So it has no metal parts. Go to 6, jumps all the way over here. So it's not white. I go to 24. Object is made of plastic. Yep, that's made of plastic. So I go to 25. Outer edge of the object is round. Yes. So I go to 26. Object has holes. Object has no holes. So it has no holes. These are just little dents. So it has no holes. So it's a spinneroo. And that would have been our intro to dichotomous keys, okay, which is in your notes. I'm just explaining how those work. Okay, for the interactive notebook assignment. And just as a little side note, with this, the ultimate goal of this assignment was you to take this organization of 2 things coming off of each one, and you would have made your own dichotomous key. So if I was classifying, let's say, the barracuda here. Okay, so it has a skeleton, go to 2. It has an endoskeleton, so I'm going to go to 3. It has teeth, so it's a barracuda, right? And you would have used your table, right? You would have used this table to make your own dichotomous key. Okay, so but we can't do that, so you're going to do an online sort of simulation of this idea of classifying things with dichotomous keys and using 2 traits, 2 physical traits. This is going to go in your notebook, okay, as your interactive notebook assignment. So what I need you to do is go ahead and try to get that circle out of here. I need you to pause the video, and I need you to copy this down. And it does go on 2 pieces of paper, which you'll see. There's actually 10 things. Okay, so fish number, common name, scientific name, and then habitat or where it lives. You can copy this one down. I'm going to put this example in when I do the video explanation of the website. So go ahead and pause the video now and go ahead and copy this table down. Okay, so what I've done actually is added a piece of paper, right? I just glued it in there, right? Just like we usually would have done. And then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video here and finish copying that. Okay, and the rest of the paper is blank. I'm only doing 10, so you can leave the rest of it blank, but the 10 wouldn't fit in there. Okay, so I've already given you the answer for the first one, but if you watch the video explanation of the website, I'll explain where these words come from. Okay, so I'll see you in the video explanation of the website. Okay, take care.